Early dawn on Lake Victoria. These fishermen are setting out for a catch. But after a couple of hours of dangling their nets, they have caught nothing and go back home disappointed. If they had made a catch, their fish would have ended up in the local market or with exporters like Peche Foods who package and export their fish. Mr. Paz Wagner is the managing director of Peche Foods and the chairman of Fish Exporters. Until last year, he exported his fish to Europe duty-free as a result of the non-reciprocal preferential market access which the EU extended to the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries, first under the Lome Conventions and later under the Cotonou Partnership Agreement. In October last year, East African Community countries moved to sign the Economic Partnership Agreement, or EPAs, with the European Union. This agreement allows exporters in EAC countries to export to the EU on duty-free and quota-free basis. Unfortunately, the agreement was not initialed until 14th October 2014 when the negotiations were concluded. This caused Kenya to revert to the Generalized System of Preferences, also known as GSP tariffs, from the 1st of October 2014 to 24th December last year, and the cost of Kenyan exports to rise sharply, rendering them uncompetitive in the global market.
On an annual basis, Kenya exports about 3.3 million kilograms of finished fish products to every destination in the world. Out of that, 3.1 million kilograms goes to the EU, which translates into 630 million Kenyan shillings. So when the signing of the EPA was delayed, our fish fillets were relatively expensive compared to fillets from other markets, like Uganda and Tanzania. The sector as a whole in Kenya, we must have missed 250 tons of fillets not being exported to the EU, which translate into a value of roughly 90 million Kenyan shillings. I missed out 4 months of production, so in my factory alone I must have lost 50 tons of sales I could have realized. We work with casual workers in the production area, so those people are, instead of working, let's say, 4 or 5 days a week, maybe they only have employment for 2 days a week.
Dr. San Bilal is a policy analyst stationed in the Netherlands and is an expert on the economic partnership agreements. We spoke to him via Skype on the same.
The economic partnership agreements come really from the specific relationship that has existed now for over 40 years between the European Union and the African, Caribbean, Pacific group of countries. Since 1975, the European Union opened its markets to the exports from ACP countries. But the question was raised of why to provide special preferences to ACP countries as opposed to other developing countries. And so the special treatment had an historical basis. These were former colonies from European countries, but this is not justifiable in the international context of why you would give preferences to a group of countries simply because of historical ties. So the WTO allows for differential treatment among countries, but that should be based on objective, transparent criteria that are based on development, not based on arbitrary preferences. While these negotiations are quite complex, the strategy has been to negotiate that with regional groupings, the basis being that all the ACP countries are involved in regional integration. And in Africa, the situation was slightly more complex because countries belong to different regional groupings. So Kenya is a member of the East African Community, but is also, for instance, a member of COMESA. And Tanzania, that is part of the East African Community, is also a member of SADC. The East Africa Community then decided to come together as a bloc to try to conclude an agreement as a bloc. But the negotiations have been kind of protracted and dragging on until the EU said we cannot continue like that forever, and we'll put a deadline in October 2014. Those countries that have not signed the agreements that they had concluded in 2007 will no longer be able to benefit from the economic partnership agreements and market access.
It's not just the fish exporters who are affected. Moses is a technical manager at East African Growers Limited, one of the country's leading fresh produce and cut flowers exporters. Last year, they made losses that not only affected their company, but other outgrowers and suppliers too.
East African Growers is a group of company employees, about 2,500 employees. We're dealing with more than 100 growers, that's for fruits and vegetables. We're currently doing on average about 150 tons per week. That would be transit times 4, that would be about 600, maybe 500 to 600 tons per month. We're also doing roses, about 150,000 stems per day. Most of our market is actually into the EU. We do 80% of our export to the EU. About 15% goes to the Middle East and 5% into Africa. Yes, there was a negative impact in terms of people losing their livelihood. 10% of our people lost labor. In terms of volumes, we reduced about 15 to 20% in terms of the volumes that we export. And that would mean all the inputs that we're buying then were reduced by about 15 to 20. Packaging we buy, fertilizers we buy, chemicals we buy.
Perhaps the most affected was the cut flowers industry. Mrs. Jane Ngige is the CEO of the Kenya Flower Council, a voluntary association of independent growers and exporters of cut flowers and ornamentals formed in 1996 with the aim of fostering responsible and safe production of cut flowers in Kenya with due consideration of workers' welfare and protection of the environment.
The volumes of flowers exported out of this country in 2014 were at about 136,000 tons, valued at 54.6 billion Kenya shillings. In Europe, we're actually the #1 exporter of flowers going into that market, with a market share of about 35%. And here you're talking about 90,000 people directly employed on the payroll, and indirectly in subsidiary areas, that's another 500,000 people. The other thing is that the industry is located in the rural areas, so a lot of these benefits, a lot of these jobs are out there in the rural areas all over the country. The exports have also impacted on our own national food production in terms of the knowledge, the capacity, the adoption of new knowledge. Over and above that, we are also a country that is aspiring to become an industrialized country in the very near future. And for that to happen, we require to import a lot of ingredients to bring into our manufacturing sector so that they can also produce valuable goods which can find their way into the market or substitute our own imports in this country.
Companies like Red Lands Roses export cut flowers to these destinations also made losses.
The delay of the signing of the EPA has greatly affected our market because if there are certain documentation that you need, and if you don't have them, then the client on the other end has to pay import duty, which was almost up to 12% on high season. So the market went down because people don't want to buy expensive flowers, import expensive flowers.
Kenya exports products worth over 119 billion shillings annually to the European market and employs over 2.3 million people, and if EPAs are not concluded, they could lead to untold losses. To avert this disaster, Kenyan business associations formed a consortium made up of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Kenya Flower Council, Kenya Fish Exporters Association, Fresh Produce Exporters Association of Kenya, among others. The consortium is working to have the EPAs concluded within the given deadlines to avoid further losses. Phyllis Wakiaga is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, whose members export value-added products to Europe.
The Economic Partnership Agreement guarantees EAC exports to the EU duty-free, quota-free access for all products except arms. For the EU exports to EAC, it will guarantee duty-free access for certain products over a period of 25 years. So that is the period for liberalization of the market. However, under the agreement, for exports from the EU to the EAC, certain products are in the sensitive list, This is mainly industrial products and agricultural products. Those will not move to duty-free even within the end of the period. For the fresh produce, the manufacturing sector is a key supplier of the fresh produce sector in terms of packaging material. For the manufacturing sector, this then means that the EU guarantees us market for packaging material for goods that will be going into the European Union. Other area that is important in the EPA is the trade facilitation agreement. It allows for trade facilitation of goods into the EU market and deals with areas of phyto and sanitary measures that will ensure that goods from the EAC access the EU market.
The signing of the agreement is particularly essential for Kenya, which is the only country in the EAC trading bloc classified as a developing country. The rest are categorized as least developed countries, which puts them in a better trading position compared to Kenya. Least developed countries do not have to sign the EPAs since their preferences will continue under the Everything But Arms EBA scheme. Though the EPAs were finally initialed on 14th October 2014, there remains the legal exercise of scrubbing that is currently ongoing and should be completed by October 2015. After legal scrubbing, the next step will be the translation of the agreement in all 27 EU languages and Kiswahili, signing and ratification. For EAC, the ratification process has been targeted not later than March 2016. The process of ratification will be the adoption of the EPA as a legal document in EAC countries. In Kenya, the process is that the legal document will go to Cabinet through the AG's office and then presented in Parliament. Ratification by EU will take about 12 months. The deadline given for ratification of the EPAs is 1st October 2016. If the EPAs are not signed in time in October, we risk going back to the GSP rates.
So we actually made 2 steps forward, but then we are again 2 steps back. So what is happening is a lot of competition coming from our neighbors, the West Africans, the North Africans, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda. They're coming up. And some of these constraints, really, we don't need them now if we're able to maintain our requirement as a leading exporter of fresh vegetables out of Africa.
And we're starting soon again with Europe. So, after all the things that happened last year with the delay in signing the EPA, the market was just shut down for us. So now we're starting to get back there slowly.
Currently we are looking into Asia because we are trying to expand our market to more of the dollar trading than the EU trading. The signing will definitely help with the employment, which if we can sell to Europe, then we cannot cut down on our employees. And of course the income to the country is also important. The importation of other products from Europe to Kenya and Kenya exporting to Europe is also something of importance. So we really hope that we can sign the deal.